Hello, welcome to B2B Revenue Leaders. I'm your host, Dustin. This episode is brought to you by Testimonial Hero. If you're struggling to create the customer content that you want, be it video testimonials or case studies, and you want an expert who does this all day, every day to sit down and help you with it, check them out at testimonialhero.com. And on this episode, I'm joined by Ashleigh Early, who is the CEO of Other Side of Sales Consulting and the co-host of Across the Pond and Over the Rainbow. And we're talking about how the way you treat your sales team is the way they're going to treat their prospects and customers. So treat your sales team well. Seems like a no-brainer. We also hit on why OTE, or faux TE, as Ashleigh calls it, needs to go away, and who exactly it is that is mistreating sales. Hey, Ashleigh, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited for you to be here because it's a topic we haven't covered before, which kind of seems like an obvious one. And that's the topic of how you should treat your salespeople and how it actually matters. Novel concept, you should treat your salespeople nice, but let's unpack why that's an important concept for you.
It's a big thing for me in a lot of different ways because it really comes down to something that should be very obvious, but a lot of companies I don't think really consider, which is the better you treat your salespeople, the better your salespeople will treat your prospective clients. Mm-hmm. That simple. You want happy salespeople because you want them to be excited to talk about your company, excited to talk about your product. And the best way to make them excited isn't to yell at them, be excited. It's to actually help make them excited, make their job something that's fun. This job is hard on the best days. On the best days, I compare a lot to baseball in the sense of when you go up to the plate, the best players in baseball barely bat, 300?
Yeah.
Or something? So that means they're missing 70% of the time. The best salespeople are missing 70% of the time. And we all talk about the wins and the bigs and it's all great and stuff, but there's a lot in the middle. And so the more you can help dampen those lows, reduce the amplitude of the highs and the lows, just the better they're going to do in general. It's this whole idea. I've worked with a lot of companies now around this idea of realistic quota setting, unfortunately, I don't have enough publicly available data to do a study or something, but in general, the people that set quotas in such a way where people don't have to stress about being able to make their rent, not only stay at the company longer, but also tend to perform better overall. So they actually tend to outperform their quota more than if you set the quota a little bit higher and people are just barely making it every single month and feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm barely making it. Right? Yeah, it's this whole idea of people perform better when they're properly incentivized versus out of fear. You get more flies with honey than with vinegar.
Yeah, which seems obvious. It's funny when you pictured don't just yell at them to be excited. I pictured someone yelling at their kid, stop crying, as if it's going to actually happen.
I always love when people are like, oh, don't panic. I'm like, oh, thanks. I'll just turn it off now. Yeah. Why didn't I think of that?
I think the quota one is interesting because OTE is a myth, is my thing. Yeah, like people just make up random numbers.
I started calling it faux TE, FAUX. It's faux TE.
Trademark at the end.
You can go on any number of these sites and find people like, I make $1 million a year. And that's the problem is it's a lot like kind of stock options in my opinion, because for everyone knows someone who hit it big on their options, who actually is at the company that does pay them a fair OTE and they make a ton of money. Mm-hmm. Everyone knows someone or a couple people where that's happened to. So it perpetuates this myth of, okay, so it'll happen to me if I just work a little harder, if I just get this right, if I just get that right. But the reality is there's a lot more that goes into OTE than just a number. It comes into your territory. It comes into saturation. It comes into product market fit. It comes into the skills of deployment, of renewals, of how the quota is even structured. There's a lot more that goes into it. And the deeper you get into your sales career, I've noticed the better people get at negotiating their comp. Because you fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And salespeople are very gun shy at this point, especially after the pandemic. Like we've seen, we're the second ones to go after recruiting. So we're much more protective than I think we were even 10 years ago around making sure we cover our butts. So
the interesting thing too is you would think like the people who hit quota, you think would be treated well, be given little perks. Sometimes they are, but oftentimes you hit your quota and here's a new territory that they don't say it, but you get because this territory sucks, but you're good and you can probably grow it. So
yeah, it's something that, or it's, hey, you hit $1 million last year. So because we have to hit 20% growth, your quota is now 1.2 million.
Yeah.
Which then it's so crazy because then companies get mad about this idea of sandbagging. They say, oh, people are holding back deals. So, because you're punishing them for success. And yes, I understand the company needs to grow and all this other stuff, but it can't all be on salespeople trying to get more water from a rock. If we went and we drained our pipeline to get to that number that year, we have to completely rebuild and find 20% growth with the exact same resources we had last year. Of course, we're set up to fail. Of course we are. But boards don't want to hear this. And there's a bit of an endemic among a lot of sales leaders where they just made a career of staying at a company for 18 months, getting as much as they can in 18 months, then moving on to the next company. And so perpetuates this thing of, okay, I'm going to get everything I can, drain the pipe, and then it's the next guy's problem.
Yeah.
And how much of that is intentional and insidious and how much of it is accidental or a function of the situation, I don't know. But I know it's happening often enough that it's a major issue. And when you pair that along with a lot of the trends we see around hiring and promotion of women, Black, and other minority groups, and more specifically the lack of promotion among these groups into the higher echelons of sales leadership, especially the really truly high echelons, the CSOs, the true VPs of sales, stuff like that, you start seeing some really disturbing trends there as well. But that's a different topic altogether.
Yeah, so a lot to unpack there really on the sales side. And like you said, a lot of it is the quota attainment side, the OT, the shifting goalposts, all of that. I'm curious as well, like when you first mentioned this topic, I thought of all this stuff too, but I also thought, the first thing I thought actually is who is most guilty of treating salespeople poorly? Like aside from the numbers, aside from all that, but I'm sure you have a take on this, so I had to ask.
Salespeople. We're the worst ourselves.
On themselves, yeah.
We're the worst on ourselves because, and this is the problem, is it's a twofold thing. One is self-delusion. We are very good at selling ourselves a pack of lies. You have to. It's part of the territory. I joke a lot. I need to find a better analogy because now that I understand where the analogy came from, we have to drink the Kool-Aid, as it were. So therefore, we have to buy in. So we agree to these crazy numbers. We agree to these practices because we think this is going to be the one where I'm going to hit it big. This is the one where I'm going to make my money. And because it's commission is so much of what we earn, it becomes a very risky, very dangerous scenario very quickly. That said, it also flips into, there are always plenty of people who will say, oh, I've done it this way for so long. I've done it this, I've handled this way. And so people fall into these patterns of not wanting to change, or I can only work under these very specific set of circumstances. And anyone who can't do that, that's on them. So there's a lot of this. I think salespeople are the worst themselves, but the biggest thing is that we accept this behavior. We accept these practices. People can't stop until we tell them to stop. So that turns into, there are lots of companies I can't and won't do business with because we don't align on these things. And that's okay. There are plenty of companies that do align. It's fine. But there are so many salespeople who get desperate, who get sad, who get whatever, and are lulled into these things and accept these terrible situations because they're desperate. And then there's plenty of people, pundits on LinkedIn and everywhere else saying, oh, you should be able to make it work because you're just not doing this or not doing that. So that's one. I think salespeople are the worst. The other side of it, though, I think is, it's not even within the companies. I think it's VCs. This is going to get me murdered probably, but whatever. I think it's VCs. I think venture capital culture, especially when it comes to how they treated sales, they look at it as a completely commoditized skill, and it's not. It's not something where it's like, oh, I'm just going to go, and no shade on engineers at all. But it's not something where it's, oh, okay, we need to build this product faster, so we'll just hire a few more engineers that can get this done in under a shorter time frame. It doesn't always work like that, but I know with engineers, sometimes that's the case. We've seen again and again and again that you cannot just go hire 100 salespeople, divide up the known world amongst them, and then multiply up and go, we conquered the world. It doesn't work. Half of them, 3/4 of them fail out because they weren't set up for success. They weren't properly enabled. The company just wasted a ton of money. And then, oh, why didn't this work? But because they do it in VC world at 15 different companies, one of those companies, it'll work. And they say, aha, see, it works. Instead of going, no, it doesn't work. It only works this one time. The rest of the time, what's going on? And what happens to all the collateral damage around it? Nothing. Other than, hopefully, we're finally starting to kick this job hopper culture, especially in sales, because I don't know many people who are intentional job hoppers. Most people are job hoppers because they got laid off 3 companies in a row. Because I even had this happen to me. I was at a company for 3 months that I loved this company. I loved the leadership. I was so sold on them. And they just decided to pivot on a dime and let the entire sales team go basically in one day. And I told people, I was like, look, don't judge my skills based off that. Judge my ability to judge a company off that. Now I go, no, don't even judge my ability to judge a company off that. Judge that company for how they treated us, for how they chose to manipulate and present the commitments they were making to their people and then rescind on them 90 days later, literally. It's an interesting world we live in, but a lot of that, like I said, so it's salespeople who tolerate it. And then I think it's the VCs who drive it, this churn and burn culture. I think those are the two worst.
Yeah, it's funny. I felt this really firsthand because I just hired for a sales role. I have a new guy starting tomorrow, adding an AE to the team. The amount of really good candidates who had just gotten laid off was mind-numbing.
Yeah.
Like I had 1,000 candidates and I would have hired 50 of them probably. There were a lot of good ones. And the one thing that we called out is like our AE has been here 5 years, our other one like 4. So we would rather have that because let's be real, I don't like having to constantly train salespeople.
No.
Like it takes a lot of time. It's not effective. So we called that out in the post and we got, I think, really good people because of that. So I think salespeople want that culture. They just, you said, accept what they get.
No, I used to joke in interviews, and I used to do this as a way to counter my age and some of the preconceptions people get when they look at me and they guess my age and they hear that I'm married. They start to make a lot of preconceptions. And so I used to joke, like a lot of women my age, I'm looking to settle down. Now I don't make that joke because a lot of different reasons.
Yeah.
But the point stands, most of us, I would love to be at a point in my career. I think a lot of people, even in their first few years, would love to know, okay, I can be at this company for 10, 15 years. But they'd love the job security that our parents, our grandparents' generations have, where it's like, okay, you take a job and I know that I'm going to have a job as long as I do my job for a set period of time. That's the scariest thing about a lot of sales jobs is you can do your job to the best of your ability and not have a job at the end of the day because of either an unrealistic quota, a restructuring, an acquisition, or just the company deciding we're pivoting completely and killing off your line of business.
Yeah. So let's say new salesperson, or not new sales, just salesperson listening to this in the market wants to find a new job. How the hell do they spot some of these traps is my question there. What should they look out for?
Yeah, it's a few different things. One is do your research about the person you're going to be working for. So not the CEO, your manager, because people don't leave bad jobs, they leave bad managers. And when I say do your research, I literally talk to the other people that are managed by that same manager or who have been managed by that manager. No one's going to be perfect across the board. You talk to anyone who I've managed, they will happily tell you some of my shortcomings, and I tell them to. Because you need to sign on to, the way I tell a lot of people when they're looking for jobs is, look, you want to pick the problems that you can handle. No job is going to come without problems. No job is going to come without drama. Trying to find that, it's not going to work. It's just not. The world is what it is. But you can pick the problems you're willing to handle. So one of the things I learned after working at that company where I had a short stint was I'm not going to work with people who are inexperienced, immature leaders. So people who it's their first time leading a big company or something like that. I was like, no, I'm not. At that point after that, I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. Now I only work with those leaders because I like those problems. I can handle those problems versus some of the more problems at entrenched companies where it's okay. Everything takes forever, longer, not just longer deal cycles, but people are more entrenched. There's more politicking and stuff like that. I'm just like, no, I don't have time for that anymore. I'd rather deal with someone who admits I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And so it's pick your problems in there. Check the manager. The other thing I think that's really important is, this sounds really weird, but trust your gut. Really pay attention to where you're holding tension in your body in the interview process when you're meeting with leadership, when they're discussing comp and all this stuff. If there's like tension in your shoulders or your back or something like that, and you don't know why, there's probably something happening that maybe you need to pay attention to. You just don't know it yet. Not always, but sometimes it's something to pay attention to. And the last thing is ask for this stuff up front. Don't be scared to ask for it up front. If they get pissed at you for asking that, imagine what they're going to do when you actually ask them to pay you properly. Ask for what is the comp plan? How are numbers set? What do I do if I disagree with this? Have those questions openly and tell them the context. Hey, I'm asking these because I want to make sure that that when I commit to you, you're committing to me just as much. I want to make sure this is a good fit on both sides. A lot of people I talk to are really scared to ask those questions, but then you get a lot of respect as well for asking. That's the other weird thing. It does two things. One, it filters out the really toxic environments very quickly. But two, it also generally gets a lot of respect in healthy environments. Wow, you're being very transparent in a way that I appreciate because now I know where you stand and where I stand, and okay, we can build trust going forward. So
yeah, it's funny because companies do all those things the other way, right? Like they do the interview, they do the references. So We found that too. A couple of our top candidates reached out to our current AE and asked questions. And I was like, that's a bonus point. Like you took the initiative to do that. And if you do that and say, hey, we're not a fit, cool. At least you did that. We're on the same page. I do want to mention the trust your gut one, because you said maybe it does sound a little weird to say, but I've been in the situation where interviewing, I'm like, holy shit, that's a lot of money. You're tempted, but you don't feel right about it.
It's something
it's never worked out.
Nothing looks wrong. You can't put your finger on it, but there's just something sitting somewhere.
Yeah. So for salespeople, I think that's a key one, because it's easy to get desperate with the thousands of quality sales reps out there, right?
And I get it. Like I've been bluntly, I've been broke. I've been broke. I've been in debt. I come from America. I come from the United States. I am very familiar with medical debt and all that stuff. The need to keep insurance active and all that stuff. I understand deeply the need to stay employed and the pain that comes from being unemployed, especially unexpectedly or for a long period of time. It makes me sick to my stomach thinking about it.
Yeah.
But you do no one any good taking a job that's going to be toxic and bring you down even more and do more damage versus just doing these basic checks just to make sure you end up somewhere good. It's not easy. It's not great. And the other thing I'll say too is a lot of it also, the people I know who are getting jobs right now are being proactive about their job search. They're not just applying to job postings. It's, for example, Dustin, like I'm curious of those people you hired, how many of them actually reached out to you specifically and said, hey, I just applied. Here's why you should interview me out of your giant stack of 1,000 applicants.
Not many, but almost all of the top ones did.
Yep. It's taking that time for the jobs that really matter, the jobs that you're really a good fit for. Figure out who the hiring manager is. Huge fan of doing video and voice messages on LinkedIn. Send them that thing that's personalized. Tell them your 10-second why you should talk to me. And it can be work relevant. It can be not work relevant. It doesn't particularly matter, but just something to get attention and stand out. Because if you're willing to do that to get a job, you're going to be willing to do that to get a customer. And that's what companies want to see. So it's display those little bit of skills. It doesn't always work. It's not 100% it's going to work. But if you do 15 of those a day instead of 50 applications, you're going to get a lot more interviews. And I say this across a lot of people, and this is the same thing I know a lot of recruiters are saying as well.
Yep. And good salespeople have that skill set anyways, right? Like they're doing it to prospect every day, so might as well use it. The other one I looked at actually was how many questions they ask me and the quality of questions in the interview. So not just their responses, but more, are they doing like a discovery on me? Are they asking the follow-up questions? Are they digging in? Because then they'll do that with their customers.
Yep. It's the style of questions too. It's not just are you asking good questions, but these are questions that are designed to incite empathy and understanding and get really deep information, or are these questions that are feeling manipulative or clearly just driving to one end? Because we've all been in those sales calls or in those interviews where someone's just clearly going towards an objective and they're going to steamroll every objection I've got. That's not the experience I want customers to have when they're engaged with my salespeople. I want my salespeople to feel good and excited so they make our customers feel good and excited and safe. If you give us your money, you trust us to solve this problem, your problem is safe. We will do whatever it takes to fix it. And if something goes wrong, we'll handle it. That's the big thing. When something goes wrong, we'll handle it. If your employees know they've got your back, then they will have their customers' back, and the customers will love you forever when that happens. There's been some studies. I was actually reading something the other day around if a technical support ticket was solved within a certain period of time with a certain amount of satisfaction, the company was like 10 times more likely to renew.
Yeah.
Because once you earn someone's trust with an actual problem, you love them forever. Right? We see this with our friends all the time. We all have those friends who, oh my gosh, they were there for me. I have a friend, my husband's a hockey player. My husband recently took a hard hit. He injured I think it's called his AC joint in his shoulder. And he had the car at the rink. We live in Europe. We only have one car. So I called a friend. I was like, hey, are you home? And she's like, yeah, what do you need? I'm like, can you drive me to the rink? Love her forever. I already did. But like just those little moments of being there for someone, that's what builds long-term relationships. That's what decreases churn. That's what makes profitable companies.
Yeah. I think that's a great way to wrap it. It's funny. My next question was going to be like, how would you summarize all this? And you went to it. You did it right away. And
can you tell I do a lot of podcasts?
A few. It's almost like you host one too. I don't know.
Really? Crazy.
So I think, that's the key then really is just, this sounds like some dumb advice I would give my kids, but treat people the way you want to be treated.
It's not dumb. remarkably hard.
Yeah. So I think we did a good job here advocating for salespeople, for anyone else hiring, for salespeople looking. If anything you said here really caught their eye and they're like, hey, I want to talk to Ashleigh about this, or I want to connect with her, how should they do that? How should they learn more about you?
Yeah. So ashleighearly.com and othersideofsales.com for consulting are both still under construction 6 months later. Basically, it's when I have time. But LinkedIn's the best way. So linkedin.com/in/Ashleigh Early, spelled as I'm sure you see it on the screen at this moment. DMs are always open. Comment on my posts. But seriously, reach out anytime. Always open. If I don't respond right away, feel free to poke it back up to the top because LinkedIn's inbox sucks.
But it does indeed. Yeah. So we'll include those links. Ashleigh, thanks so much. I really enjoyed this. Appreciate you coming on the show.
Of course. Great being here.
Thanks for listening to this episode. My key takeaway is just the really simple concept that happy salespeople who are treated well and like the company they work for will do a better job selling. And it's one of those things, like, it's difficult to quantify, but it's incredibly obvious. People buy from people they know, like, and trust. And disgruntled salespeople who aren't excited about what they're selling just aren't going to perform as well as happy salespeople. So if you enjoyed this episode, head on over to wherever you get your podcasts, hit subscribe, leave us a review. I always appreciate it. And I'll be back next Tuesday with a new episode.